everyone. Sounds like it's been a really great event, full of lots of discussions today. Thank you for joining. I think this is the last panel of the day. Woo! My name is Joy Forehand. I'm the Vice President of Workforce and Community Success at Central New Mexico Community College, right down the street. So thank you for the invitation today to moderate this fantastic panel. And I think the way that we're going to kick it off is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves and then your role in quantum workforce development.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? All right.
Yeah, right.
My name is Megan Ivory. I am at Sandia National Labs. My background is in atomic physics. So I started at Sandia doing trapped ion atomic clocks and then quantum computing. And now I spend a lot of my time doing workforce development, working with these two and many others in the community and in the room here, and really trying to fill in some gaps at the earlier education stages.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Rayshap. I teach at Central New Mexico Community College doing workforce development. This is my encore career. I worked in the, what do you guys call it? The classical computing, the old computing paradigm, making semiconductors at Intel for about 25 years. And about 5 years ago, got to pursue a passion of teaching. And then somehow about a year ago, you two turned me into a quantum person. So we'll see how it goes.
Awesome. Hi, all. Jake Douglas, as you know, I'm at Sandia National Labs, where I do business development. So I work with our staff members and leadership on strategy, communication, and workforce development. So I have been working on things like QCamp. In the Elevate Quantum world, I'm helping guide the higher level strategy and super excited to start engaging people across the full educational spectrum.
Coordination. Sounds great. Well, let's go ahead and jump into our first question for discussion. So Sandia has been working to build a pipeline into the quantum workforce for several years now with QCamp. Tell us a little bit about that program.
All right, so what QCamp is trying to do is really fill in some, what we think are crucial gaps in the workforce pipeline. If you were here for the past hour, you probably wonder, like, what's the gap? I mean, that was amazing. And I think most of us in this room even have come about our quantum lives through a more traditional pathway, which is if you choose to major in some kind of STEM, usually physics or engineering in college, then in your junior or senior year, you'll probably take a quantum mechanics course. And if you're really excited by that, maybe you decide to go and do a PhD in an R1 institution. And obviously that is very successful in some ways, but it's also a little bit lacking in some ways too. And one of the big ways that I see is in diversity and in weighting. You know, we have a lot of amazing talent in the US that will get excited about something when they're in middle school or high school and choose to pursue that as a career path. But if they don't know about quantum, then they can't make those choices to put them on a path to participate in this kind of career. So QCamp is a summer camp that aims to introduce quantum concepts and careers to not just high school students, but also high school teachers. And this recognizes that we can only have so much impact through our camps reaching students, but if we can reach the teachers as well and arm them with the tools that they need to introduce it in their classrooms, we can have a much broader reach. And here in New Mexico, we think this is a really great place to do it, in particular because we're a majority minority state, and by just reaching a little bit beyond our Albuquerque community, we can bring a lot of diversity to this field, which we know is missing if we wait until students are already almost graduating from college. So I'll leave it there and Jake is going to add on to that.
Yeah, so just in the spirit of partnerships. So we've been doing this. We just completed our 3rd year, and to stand up the initial camp, we worked with over 30 different experts from quantum, from education, from New Mexico State University, from UNM, from the National Labs. Landel has been a great partner in hosting in Santa Fe. And we've reached a couple hundred participants now. And we're finding ways to scale it and grow it. And I just wanted to touch on the partnership piece because that's been so critical for actually creating this, for having our NMSU professors being willing to come down and talk to our high school teachers. And the broader community engagement pieces let us really drive to a lot greater impact than had we just developed it alone at Sandia.
I'll refrain from calling out specific individuals, but we had our final symposium award date in this room. So obviously UNM, huge partner. Thank you for that. And we've had really great partnerships with some folks at Lannel, and we're really excited to continue that hopefully through QNMI.
Great, and I think that partnership and community engagement that you just spoke about is a good segue into our next question. How are CNM and Sandia partnering around workforce development, particularly around quantum technicians?
Let's start.
Great. So as we saw on the screen in the previous session, there's a lot of folks with advanced degrees, a lot of you in this room that have gone through and done a lot of years of study and gotten a lot of work into getting this quantum industry going. But we also know that as the industry grows, the need for individuals without advanced degrees that can participate in helping companies grow, do the technician work to build systems, maintain systems, operate systems is going to be absolutely critical. And the early conversations that CNM and Sandia had was really around that gap, like what it takes to bring a technologist in or a technician into the field, and how are they being trained and where are they being trained, or are they even being trained at all? When I left Intel 5 years ago, I intentionally came to CNM because I also saw in the semiconductor industry a similar gap. And it was a gap around individuals that maybe went through and got a higher level degree with a little bit of hands-on experience, or no degree with no hands-on experience, and how can you rapidly kind of create that workforce? And so one of the things that CNM specializes in and really excels at is to look at non-traditional students, the students that won't find their way to UNM or to New Mexico Tech or to NMSU or to any of these other schools, but still can play an important part in the quantum industry. And so what we're in the process of building out is a quantum technician boot camp, and it's modeled on some other technology boot camps we do. The one that we're building right now as part of Elevate Quantum is a 10-week immersive training. So it'll be a full-time 40-hour-a-week program for technician students. The prereqs to enter the program very intentionally are you need to know what a computer mouse is, and you can divide using a calculator, and we'll teach you everything else. Okay, and we've shown that we can do that with some of our other programs. We teach a little bit of trigonometry, teach a little bit of calculus. We're teaching some statistics now. What we've chosen to do, just because it allows us to touch lots of parts of the quantum information ecosystem, is we're building a lab that's going to ultimately lead its way to either a neutral atom or a trapped ion system and give these budding technicians hands-on experience with that. But along the way, they're going to learn optics. They'll learn how to align lasers, couple the fibers. How does a lens work? How does a mirror work? They're going to learn some vacuum system maintenance and assembly and troubleshooting. They're going to learn some quantum phenomena, building upon the success that Megan has had in QCamp. And then we'll bring that all together to really get them some hands-on experience with some quantum systems that in New Mexico right now are kind of behind the security battery at Sandia. We're going to bring it out to the community and allow folks to work on it firsthand. Folks that probably today don't think that they can work in the space.
Yeah, and just to add on a little bit more. So again, it's been demonstrated how many students have already come through New Mexico and are doing amazing things, right? And as we're trying to think about how to engage these new communities, we're both trying to build the pathways to jobs, right? Which we've heard from our industry partners throughout Elevate Quantum across the US, like, hey, we're going to need technicians to help maintain these systems as they are developing, but also to build pathways to more education, right? If you don't know what you want to do, maybe you can go get 10 weeks of training at CNM and figure out, oh yeah, maybe I do want to go to UNM or New Mexico Tech. And we want it to build into other programs, like UNM hosts an amazing program called QReach, an undergraduate research experience for hands-on training at the CHTM here, right? And we want to try to build pathways across everything. So from high school to community college into the really well-established programs that already exist at our universities so that our students have these opportunities in ways that they wouldn't otherwise see. And so through our partnerships, through Q&M, through Elevate Quantum, we think we actually have a path to get there.
I think we have lots of great questions to ask our panel, but I do want to turn it over to our audience too and see if you all have any questions. We can pitch to the three of them. Yes,
What does a quantum technician do?
good question.
I can start. So I worked in industry for 4 years before coming to Sandia, and it was at a quantum company that is modeling full stack. And we had technicians at that company who I think we could consider quantum technicians because they're technicians at a quantum company. And they were doing things like machining, polishing, bonding, CAD, soldering. So I can let Jake and Brian speak in more detail, but about a year ago here in Albuquerque, the QEDC hosted a workshop where we brought in a lot of the industry partners that have been here for the whole day. And we specifically asked them that question, like, do you have quantum technicians at your company? What do they do? Or do you just brand them differently? And how can we understand what kind of skills you need at those kinds of education levels and how we could help support you in teaching them, because a lot of it's all in-house right now. And they were things like Brian called out, the skills like basic optics, fiber alignment, vacuum systems, and lots more. I'll let others add.
Yeah, there's a lot of things today that either postdocs or new PhDs come into a lab or into a company, and they're not doing the most advanced stuff because they're doing, I'm not gonna call it mundane, because it's difficult work, but it's work that can be trained that doesn't require a PhD, but you kind of learn it down the PhD path. And so really the vision is to free up the thought leaders and the scientists within the company to really innovate and advance and kind of create a workforce that's really supporting them in the short term. And then what my experience has been in a large semiconductor company is over time you find that the technicians that are day in, day out have their hands on the equipment, trying to keep the equipment running, troubleshooting the equipment, maybe being field service engineers for equipment that's out in the field, start to bring stuff back to the scientists and to the researchers and to the inventors. And it creates this virtuous cycle of making systems better. And so that is our hope, is that we'll create that population that in the short term will kind of free up some of the tasks, but in the long term will be part of that virtuous cycle.
Yeah, and practically, I haven't done it in a while, so, grain of salt. But if you go Google quantum technician jobs, nothing shows up, right? There's no quantum technician job title out there. It's going to be couched in some other terms. And that's a big challenge, right? Industry is growing so fast. They're not quite sure what they want. Most of them will give us a decent idea, right? But until language is kind of standardized, and until our workforce solutions partners understand how to actually categorize them, we're not going to really be able to go and get that nice, easy data pool, right? And so there's still no comprehensive, trusted and true data that shows this is what the workforce is made up, what it needs. But we do have the partners and, talking about our region who have hired many of these technicians, right? Who need them for assembly, who need them for all the things that Megan just talked about. And they're pulling from a lot of different places right now, and they're spending a lot of time training them themselves. And so we have this opportunity to partner and again, create opportunities for these students to give them new jobs, but, free the folks who have spent 10, 12 years of their lives up to go do what they really want to do rather than having to solder.
And let me add one more thing into that. So we also kind of have, particularly here in New Mexico, the chicken and egg problem, which is, as we talked about this morning, I think it was said, New Mexico checks all the boxes, but there aren't quantum companies here, right? And so the quantum companies, as they move here, will need a workforce. And so the question is, how do you can't in good conscience train someone for a job that doesn't exist in your region, right? So how do you bring people in, train them, and then basically seed the community with a quantum-ready technician workforce so that as these companies come in, that workforce is already here. And so part of the approach that we're taking and part of the reason we're working on the systems that we've chosen to work on is we feel some of those skills are important to quantum adjacent industries. So semiconductor, solar cell manufacturer, optoelectronics, all the defense companies are kind of around the base and stuff like that. And so if we can seed folks that have some quantum knowledge, have the skills that quantum companies need, and then, which by the way, next October is when they'll be ready. So when the first company shows up next October, we'll have a workforce for them. Any takers? Okay, we got one taker, which is great. But that's another part of the strategy, right? Which is, we want to make sure that people have jobs today. And we want to also at the same time, make sure that New Mexico is ready with the workforce for whichever quantum company comes here from the PhD down to the technician, all of that is available to them.
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah, it's always the pressures in workforce development of building that really strong and robust talent pipeline that's needed down, but also creating an agile and flexible workforce for all those twists and turns, for sure. Is there another question from the audience? Yes.
Yes, when we build quantum engineering programs, we build them for T-shaped engineers who are adaptive and flexible because of rapidly changing quantum technologies. And they're very suitable for many jobs aside from quantum engineering. Is this your plan with quantum technician? How does that work in practice? And then they already have jobs in the region.
Yes. That's absolutely the plan. And the strategy is to really kind of spend time looking at companies that already exist within the region and look at the types of skills that they need and how they overlap with when we talk to quantum companies, what they're saying the skills are. So a vacuum system is a great example, right? You know, can I assemble a vacuum system and do it in a way that I don't contaminate it and do it in a way, do I know how to helium leak check? Do I know how to maybe get down to a 10 to the -6, maybe not 10 to the -9, 10 to the -6 is fine for a solar cell manufacturer. And then I just do kind of delta training when I get there. The optics alignment, you know, how to just literally set something up on an optical table and go through that process. And probably more important than anything is not what you teach in terms of the skills, but the troubleshooting skills that go with that, right? Which is how often do you put something together and it works the first time? Never, right? And so creating a workforce that has some technical skills, but more importantly, has really strong structured problem solving skills that if you give me something that's not exactly what I've seen before, I at least have a mental process on how to go through it. And I have the language that I can talk to someone like Megan and we can converse in a way that that is you know, what do I want to call it? Like quantum literate in terms of kind of the way things happen. So that's the strategy.
No, I was gonna fill in for you.
Okay.
Jake wants to talk about partnership.
I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, I actually wanted to touch on the learners that we're gonna connect with, right? So I feel like I often fall victim when I hear community college of high school students coming out. But there's a huge opportunity for retraining programs or to bring someone into a 10-week boot camp to get some of these skills that may have already gone through other, you know, education opportunities. The number of people that we heard in the previous panel who maybe started an experiment and then went to theory or vice versa. We have a great opportunity to connect with them or veteran retraining programs or a lot of different opportunities there. So that's where the boot camp focus to start things off. There are plans to build that into a 2-year degree program at C&M to partner with folks at like Front Range Community College and others across the region to understand the access points and the exit points across the workforce.
Now you maybe have to add on to that. Yeah, I apologize, I did add on to that. So the average student in our boot camp programs is in their mid-30s. They have had a career, usually not a technical career, but have learned a lot of life skills that get put with that. Probably a quarter of them are veterans coming out of the military that come with incredibly good technical skills. when I was a student, way back when, the diversity of, I went to school at the University of Michigan, engineering, probably 30% women at the time, which was probably high then and maybe high today, unfortunately. I have a class starting in 2 weeks or a week and a half, 14 students. It's an Internet of Things, so it's a technical program, 8 women, 2 Native Americans, probably majority Hispanic. Probably average age, there's folks in their 20s and there's folks in their 50s in the class. And so so you're 100% right. What we kind of think of as the entry point into education, my entry point as an 18-year-old that moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan to start my PhD path, is not the only path. And there's so many people that are available to us in New Mexico if we just open that up. So thank you, Jake.
And I'll just talk on, our cry for help. I think earlier we were talking about, the role of QNMI and how to pull in all of these various partners. And so as we build this, we certainly want to hear from industry, because you're the ones who we're trying to supply a workforce for. And we have to partner with people who are educators, because we're essentially building curriculum from scratch, and not a lot of people have thought about how to do something like this. So we're definitely open to support in those areas, and really happy to have really strong partnerships here within the state of New Mexico.
And since you mentioned QNMI, what is needed to better connect all of the stakeholders within workforce development efforts that are underway here in New Mexico? I can just tag on to that a little bit. And how can QNMI help with those efforts?
First.
Oh, Jake, should seems like a Jake question.
Jake question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think a big piece of this is there's so much excitement in the community right now with recent awards, with having these opportunities to engage at a much larger scale than we've been able to previously with our community. And I think understanding who wants to engage and how, right? It's the only way that we'll be able to do this is by aligning efforts that make sense, right? And by going after things that we're all passionate about, right? And so I think the partnership piece of it is, as we're building some of these programs, how can we connect with your communities? How can we get jobs at industry? How can we work with our faculty members who are looking for students to work in their labs, things of that nature? And I'm hoping through QNMI, we'll have the platform to have that reach across the state rather than just Albuquerque or just, Los Alamos and these other places.
I think because of some of the connections that have happened because QNMI, we've started to see some of that happen. Nikolai from New Mexico Tech visited CNM just a few weeks ago, and we started talking about quantum, but really where the conversation ended at, which is how do you create pathways from the community college into New Mexico Tech? There's already some into UNM, into New Mexico State, again, to bring in these other types of students into these research labs. The other really interesting side benefit of these rapid boot camps is in traditional education, someone starts and 4 years, 6 years, 8 years later, they get into industry, and that's the feedback cycle is almost measured in a decade. In a 10-week boot camp, you get feedback 3-4 times a year, and you're able to rapidly iterate the curriculum that we're building as we go to really meet the needs. This group of graduates, how are they doing? What are they good at? What are they missing? How do we iterate our curriculum as educators to better meet the needs of the quantum companies? And I think QNMI plays an important role in that connectivity.
And I'll just add, I don't think we have to talk about anymore this great foundation of programs that we already have here in New Mexico. We've already talked about some of the new ones that we're establishing to help fill in gaps. But right now, they're kind of like the bike paths here in Albuquerque. If there are any cyclists, they're kind of piecemeal. they're not particularly connected. And so I think Q and I can play the role of actually making those connections for us so that students or adults or professionals who are coming into our programs, they don't have to piece those things together themselves. They have smooth pathways to get them where they want to go in their careers.
I love that visual. It's great. I do want to turn it over. I think we have time for one more question. Yes.
So I think this is what you've been talking about, but perhaps I could get you to summarize in a particular way. So 20 years ago, this field of quantum information and quantum computation was entirely in academia and the national labs at the first order. That's true. And staffed pretty much entirely by physics PhDs, some CS PhDs, not many at the time, few chemistry PhDs, some math PhDs. Now we have the field is much broader because of the commercialization of, or the potential commercialization of quantum computing. But the private sector is still pretty much relying on physics PhDs. I think they're going to get tired of that. Not that I don't love physics PhDs, but I don't run a tech company. And I think they're going to want people who are more specifically trained in this area. So looking, let's look at 2040. How would you see degree programs and training programs for this industry? What's the mix of degrees and training going to be in 2040?
Oh, sorry.
The last part was what's this gonna look like in 2040? What is the mix of degrees, the kind of people that we're gonna see contributing as the quantum workforce? In contrast to what we've seen, honestly, like a decade ago when I was coming out of graduate school, it was still, you had to have a PhD in physics to do that. So earlier today, I think it was Zach threw up some statistics that around half of the degrees that are required for jobs today require a PhD. But the other half, they're looking for master's students, bachelor's students, and maybe even associate's degrees. And your rationale was exactly right. I think coming from a mostly research field and now approaching commercialization, productization, it doesn't really make good business sense to have PhDs doing all of the work. And so I think that's part of the drive for diversifying the kind of people that work at companies, not just degree wise, but as not just PhD versus master's versus bachelor's, but the field as well. So I'm a physicist by training, which means I am a terrible engineer, a terrible coder. And that's not really a good way to build a working device that requires such a multidisciplinary focus as quantum systems do. So we're also seeing that diversity as well.
Yeah, so give me really big error bars on this since I don't have the data in front of me.
And I'm going to be dead before your prediction. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, so as it stands today, reviewing open jobs, I believe around 30 to 40% are physics. The rest are coming from electrical engineering, math, and others. So we're already at less than half, right? And as systems continue to mature and continue to get commercialized, we would guess that that's going to continue to shrink. There is always going to be the need for that cutting edge, right? For building the next system, solving the hard science problems. But we've seen the trend over the past decade, where it was very heavily physics continue to shrink and shrink and shrink. Especially if you start thinking outside of just your traditional or full stack qubit builders. Right, if we're talking about any of the enabling technology, photonics, cryo, XYZ, right? They're pulling, they're more representative now of what I think we'll see in 2040, I think, which was the time frame. So it's already diversifying. We're seeing that growing pain, trying to understand the gap, what the actual need is. But the trends have started to emerge, and we've been able to confirm them with some light data analysis, again, with big error bars.
Maybe I'll also just briefly add that if we're successful as a field I expect there would be less emphasis on like developing new hardware and that sort of engineering, and more emphasis on software and algorithms and that sort of stuff. And we've seen that in the old computing, as they've called it as well. So fingers crossed that things work that well, and that's where we get.
Well, I want to be a good moderator and be respectful of time. Are we good on time? No more questions? Good. Oh, we have one burning question.
Well, a little bit more of a comment, because I think I've heard in a very similar setting, that there's a quantum engineering kind of program, maybe at USC. And trying to get people to do the technology stuff without actually having the PhD. And yeah, and I think I heard you all say that you're starting a program from scratch. I was like, oh, wait, there might be some other guys where you might be able to get some information about that.
So the boot camp, I think, is the from scratch part. But we are seeing an increase in quantum engineering programs, the masters, even the bachelor's programs. There's a group in Boulder working under Ben Zwickley, who is actually putting together a collection of all the different institutions across the US and what kinds of degree programs they have at every level specific to quantum. So I would direct you to that. That's a great resource. Yeah.
I should not have sat between you.
Yeah, we'll also say, the Colorado School of Mines, you can go ask Lincoln, who might raise his hand. They have an emphasis in an undergraduate minor, I believe, in quantum engineering. At New Mexico Tech, they're starting to introduce a quantum materials minor, things of that nature. So at the undergrad level, we are seeing examples of programs like this. And like Megan said, it's at the technician level that we haven't, but we are talking to others across the country who are thinking along the same lines.
Thanks, Joy.
Sounds great. Well, thank you, Megan and Brian and Jake. And if we can just give a hand to our esteemed panel, this has been fantastic.